So we finally got a good rom-com. That's the title of the video. We finally got a good rom-com and I could not be more excited. Hello and welcome back to the Miscellaneous channel where we do miscellaneous things. I'm Lenny. I typically cover TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things on this channel, so subscribe if that's your vibe. Lately on my socials and whatnot, I've been seeing discussion about that we need a resurgence in the rom-com genre. The 2000s were such an iconic time for rom-coms, and then I feel like the 2010s, the rom-coms got kind of questionable, and now we're sort of at a point where rom-coms hardly exist in media. The main time I see rom-coms be made are for Christmas movies, and a lot of times Christmas TV movies. Like I reviewed one called Love Hard this past Christmas that was pretty decent, but it's a made for TV type of quality. So today I wanted to talk to y'all about Moonshot, a new rom-com available on HBO Max. It's a pretty star-studded movie. It's definitely very quality. It has a unique setting that pushes the rom-com genre forward, and I did have high hopes for the movie, and it exceeded my expectations. I just think the bar is so low with rom-coms these days that I just don't expect the best. I don't expect good writing or any risk taking in anything about the story. Recently I reviewed Marry Me, which I was hopeful for because it was star-studded, high budget, and looked like an interesting enough concept, but in actuality the movie ended up being very mediocre and safe. But anyway, so I wanted to go in with not too many expectations for Moonshot, even though I was excited initially knowing about the cast and just the general vibe of it. So let's get into it. Is Moonshot worth watching? I think you can always tell the answer to this question by how I start off the video, but I do think Moonshot is worth watching if you're a fan of rom-coms or just any lighthearted media. Although this movie is a rom-com, I don't think it's the most chick flick feeling rom-com. So I just think if you like any kind of lighthearted media or movies, Moonshot is a great one. It's a great one for a little date night. So I do recommend it, and I was kind of sad when I looked up the reviews for this movie because they were not as great as I had perceived it. I don't know, I feel like critics maybe expect too much from the rom-com genre and they don't give it good scores, even if it's as good as you can get in that genre. It does have a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I will tell you that I don't agree with that number at all. I think it's more around the 80% realm, nothing incredibly groundbreaking, but still, pushing things forward and innovative and a great style. And then on top of it, good writing, funny writing, good acting. It checked all the boxes for me. Metacritic's even worse. I'm so upset. It has a 60 and a 5.2 user score. I think it's out of 10. So it's mixed or average. I see some good reviews from publications. Here's a review that gives it a 50. No rom-com set in space should feel this ordinary. Here's the thing about rom-coms. You have to have a balance of new and interesting and fresh and classic tropes we know and love. We want some of those classic elements like enemies to lovers or a fashion shopping montage or something. We want at least some of those ingredients because that's what we recognize about rom-coms while mixing in something really cool and interesting and new. And I feel like this movie has the perfect balance of both, and that's why I'm upset when people say it's too ordinary because a lot of rom-com tropes happened, and it's yeah, they did, but they did it well, and the dialogue was witty and it was interesting. So I don't know, I have beef with Mr. Nick Allen of RogerEbert.com. Some random user on Metacritic gave it a 1 out of 10 and said, "This is what happens when experienced Hollywood writers are replaced with kids. I would say cute, although cutesy is more apt. Formulaic and predictable. None of it makes sense. They're saying the intended audience is 12 to 15-year-old teens. That shade at me, okay. Ew, okay, it got kind of racist at the end. So, never mind. That's what I'm saying. These critics, I'm not having it, and I say this movie is great. It is on the cutesy side, but that's why I said if you like lighthearted stuff, you'll like this movie. So let me talk a little bit about Moonshot. What is the unique thing about it? If you can't guess it from the title or haven't seen the trailer, this rom-com is set in space. It takes place in a future date of humanity, and I'll get more into that in the spoiler section. But that's the interesting thing about it. It sounds really silly as a concept when you hear rom-com in space, just those words. But they actually did it in a very charming way. They stylized it really cute. And the uniqueness of the setting and the world building that went into this are the things that made up for, you know, the typical rom-com tropes. The movie stars Lana Condor of To All the Boys I Loved Before franchise. I think that's what she's most known for, and I'm a big fan of that franchise, so excited to see her. Opposite her is Cole Sprouse, or as my boyfriend calls him, Cold Sprouts, my childhood first love. It was an unhealthy obsession, but I was like 9 years old, so we all make mistakes. And sorry to have been a creepy stalker to Cole and Dylan Sprouse at the time. Also in supporting roles in this movie are Michelle Buteau, who I am obsessed with, and I am obsessed that she is collecting rom-coms like they're Infinity Stones. Name any rom-com or teen movie and Michelle Buteau is in it. She was in Marry Me, literally the last rom-com that has come out and I reviewed. I love seeing her here. Also Zach Braff is in this, though not too much. Other sort of love interests are played by Mason Gooding. He plays Calvin. Emily Rudd, no relation to Paul Rudd, I checked. But Mason Gooding is the son of Cuba Gooding Jr. So there's nepotism. Oh, Lucas Gage is in this, which I believe he was... This is embarrassing that I remember this, but I think he was the ass in White Lotus. If you've seen White Lotus, you know what I'm talking about. Cameron Esposito is in this. She's a comedian, and I hadn't really seen her act before, but I've, heard of her as more of an activist. This movie was filmed mostly in the summer of 2021, and it was filmed in Atlanta, and the movie released on March 31st of 2022 on HBO. So let me get into my recap of the plot. Since this is a rom-com, what I like to do with these is watch the trailer with y'all and recap it that way, because I've noticed that rom-com trailers kind of give you a lot of the story in the trailer. So we'll see. I actually avoided this trailer, even though because I was really excited. I followed both Lana and Cole on their socials, and I saw that this movie was coming, and I was like, oh my god, I'm excited, but I also didn't want to watch the trailer because I just didn't want to learn more about it because I was just so excited about it. I didn't want to get preemptive spoilers. So it's the year 2049 on Earth, and our protagonist Walt is trying to get into a program where students can go visit Mars. And he keeps applying over and over, but at this time in human society, only the brightest people are going to Mars. It's like scientists, they're all trying to figure out how to make it habitable, or just super rich people that can just afford a ticket to go, which costs around $1 million. Walt is pretty mediocre, and he just has this sense of adventure, and that's why he wants to go to Mars, but he doesn't have much to offer being like a scientist or anything, and he's broke. He works as a barista with a robot named Gary. So he meets Lana Condor at a party. It's her party, actually, at her mansion. She is talking virtually with her long-distance boyfriend, and her boyfriend's actually on Mars as a scientist. He is named Calvin. So she's talking to Calvin with these orbs, and something that was cool about this movie is that it was an interpretation of the future, and it was very stylized and stuff, so it wasn't anything too pessimistic or cynical, but it was funny to see the different technologies they chose as being part of the future. But later on, Walt sees Sophie at the coffee shop looking really sad, and he talks to her and gets to know her, trying to figure out what the issue is, and it's actually that her boyfriend has decided to stay on Mars indefinitely instead of coming back after a year like he had planned. It is there where Walt kind of accidentally convinces her to buy a ticket to Mars. He's just like, just buy a ticket, haha. And then she's like, actually, I do have $1 million because I'm rich. So she just buys a ticket. She goes to the airport to go on the trip, and it is there where Walt actually follows her because he knows she's gonna be at the airport. So he finds her there. It's a whole like funny moment, and he convinces her to bring him in through the gate as like her family, like to say goodbye, even though they hardly know each other. They just know each other from talking this one time. So rewind back to the party where he first met Sophie. Walt actually meets a girl named Ginny there who he kind of knew, but they go on this one night adventure together and kind of fall in love-ish and end up kissing. In the end, they're together the entire night. She is gonna move the next day and we don't know to where, and then we find out at the very end when they part ways that she's moving to Mars. He wants to go to Mars even more now because he kind of has a girlfriend there. So the party happens like a month before Sophie buys the ticket and they have their talk at the coffee shop. There's a month between that where he has kind of a texting long distance relationship with Ginny, but she is responding less and less, and he really wants to get to Mars because this is the last shuttle in like a year. Walt has this plan to sneak into the shuttle. He doesn't tell Sophie this plan. He just finds her at the airport where he convinces her to take him along to the gate. Once he's at the gate and she aboards the plane, that's when he runs to be a stowaway on the ship. So he gets on the ship in an escape pod. It's funny, they have very different journeys to space. And then it takes about a month to get to Mars. So most of the movie takes place on the journey from Earth to Mars. However, because Walt is there illegally without a ticket or anything, they find a way to get him to impersonate Calvin, like get an ID with Calvin's name, and they have to kind of pretend to be boyfriend and girlfriend. Kind of a classic rom-com trope, love it. Their dynamic is also very enemies to lovers. She's super cautious and meticulous, and she's like important scientist and stuff, and Walt is very into adventure and risks and having fun. They're in space and they have to live together in the same room and getting to know each other. He is getting to know Calvin a lot, like just knowing his information so that he can impersonate him properly. Michelle Buteau plays Captain Tartar, who kind of has a funny banter with them and almost feels like she's catching them in the act, but then doesn't catch them. They have this whole moment where Walt gives a lecture. Sorry, am I talking loud? I have headphones in. So Walt is forced to give a lecture as Calvin on Calvin's area of expertise, and it's that classic trope of like someone starts with an awkward speech and they don't know what to say, and then they go into this like deep monologue about love or something. It's kind of like the 10 Things I Hate About You when she's reading the poem and then it gets really personal. So anyway, this monologue convinces Cameron Esposito's character and her girlfriend to get engaged in front of everybody, and they have this big engagement party. Sophie and Walt are just really bonding. Sophie is feeling more and more distant from her boyfriend and his family who are all on Mars, and Walt is sort of helping her see that he's sort of putting her second behind his own goals instead of, you know, planning their life together as she wants. Okay. That's enough of the trailer. The trailer was actually not that informative, which I'm proud of because that is another sign that this movie is decent. Usually if the trailer gives you the whole plot, it means the movie has nothing else to offer beyond those 3 minutes. Marry me. Eventually they make it onto Mars, which is the big goal. However, they had this emergency on the spaceship where they like hit something, so they had to kind of take inventory of everybody, and Walt had to go into hiding in this spaceship. Honestly, when the spaceship hit something, I was like, oh my god, it's Titanic. For a lot of this movie, I had felt it was kind of similar to Titanic in plot. Not quite, but there's kind of a lot of parallels. Like, she's rich and he's poor, and she's careful and cautious and he's, you know, adventurous and risk-taking. Like the boarding of a ship and having a nice ship for a while, like it was very Titanic versus the spaceship. That she is engaged to another man, even though in Moonshot he's nice and normal, not like a crazy guy like Cal. So when the ship hit an iceberg, I was literally, not an iceberg, an asteroid, I don't know. I was like, oh my god, it's the iceberg moment. It's like, it's over. They're gonna hang onto a door and Walt is gonna not have enough room on it. Luckily, my boyfriend reminded me that the movie is an hour and 44 minutes long, and if that kind of disaster was happening, it would probably be way longer, like Titanic. So after the emergency is when Walt has to kind of be in hiding, and they finally land on Mars, and Walt gets arrested upon landing, and while she goes back to her boyfriend and family. Something I forgot to mention, in this world there's a billionaire called Leon Covey, who is the billionaire responsible for making space travel like this possible or whatever. Walt is obsessed with him, and once they get on Mars, the billionaire finds Walt like in the detention area, takes him into his office, and he explains that he actually knew the whole time that Walt was sneaking on the ship because they have cameras everywhere. It's like crazy surveillance, and they were just letting him go so that they could observe all of their security issues. But then the board wanted to sue him back on Earth for sneaking onto the ship like this, and Leon was like, I hate the board of directors, so I leaked the footage of you sneaking on the spaceship, and it went viral, and now it's a whole viral trend. That was a random thing to incorporate, but I appreciate them adding in a moment of viral and social media stuff to this that didn't really need it. So Leon, like the true capitalist that he is like, why don't you become the next face of my brand, and I will, waive all these lawsuits for you, or, you won't get in trouble for this. So Walt agrees and is like, okay, I'll be your Mars influencer or whatever. This is a weird plot line, I will give it that. So Walt does a little bit of that, but then he realizes he is just as unhappy as he was on Earth. And on Earth, all he wanted to do was get to Mars. But it was kind of a moment of, now what? Like, now I'm on Mars and it's still the same society and life. So he realizes it's not about where you are, it's about who you're with, I guess. While all this is happening, Sophie is back with her boyfriend and his family, and just realizing that like her needs are always secondary to his, and thinking about what Walt had told her about and maybe how she felt with him and stuff. And she finally talks to her boyfriend's mom, to Calvin's mom, who she's very close with, and she took her in when she was young, when her parents died. So basically her boyfriend's mom is kind of her adopted mom, and that's where I was like, wait, so you're kind of dating your stepbrother? It's kind of a Life with Derek situation. But anyway, so Calvin's mom is like, you know what, it doesn't matter if you want to do your own thing, you should. Don't just stay with Calvin just to keep this family together or whatever. So Sophie decides to go back to Earth because she never really wanted to go to Mars. She was just there, to be with her boyfriend. And her science work is all about cleaning up Earth and cleaning up the trash on Earth, which has become a way bigger problem than it is now. And she's really committed to helping conserve Earth rather than going to colonize Mars. So she boards the ship back, and Walt finds out that she's on the last ship back to Earth, and he's like, oh my god, even on Mars we get an airport chase scene. We don't really get the airport part, but I think it was just a nod to that element of rom-coms. At the end, Sophie's on the ship, like heading to Earth, and she thinks she's alone, and then Walt pops in and it's like, I'm going with you, woo. And then they kiss, and that's the end. So that was the movie, and now let me get into some of my thoughts and opinions about different things that stood out to me, just kind of random thoughts I had while I was watching. Something that was just really interesting about the whole movie is seeing an interpretation of 2049. I like the notion of imagining the future of Earth, and I think it's kind of a daunting thing for a writer to take on because it's hard to predict. Like, you cannot predict what 2049 is going to look like, and if you're going to do it in a movie, then you just got to commit to the world you've built. Like, it doesn't have to be accurate. In my opinion, it doesn't have to be extremely accurate. I think it just needs to feel different and be interesting. I'll forgive, any science that is left behind. I think a big element they emphasized about 2049 was the AI and how it has developed. There's a lot of kind of robot or voice type of assistants in this movie that are a lot more developed than the AI we have now. They know how to respond emotionally to like human emotional moments. So like if Walt said, I'm trying to get my girlfriend back, or she's not talking to me, the AI would respond like, I hope you can get back together soon. On the outside, for example, the robot Gary that Walt worked with at the coffee shop, the robot itself was not futuristic looking. Honestly, the whole movie was pretty like colorful vintage vibes for, you know, the furniture and the outfits and things like that. So it was interesting how they kind of took a vintage aesthetic but made it future. The robot itself looks pretty vintage. It's not a pretty and sleek robot, but the AI is more developed. So they went that route of developing more kind of like the insides of robots while keeping like a vintage robot-y feel to them. I think in general, it's just optimistic to think 2049 even exists for this movie. I mean, I know it's a rom-com. It's not gonna have the planet up in flames. When the movie started, I was like, okay, 2049, hopefully we see that year. It seems like Earth's biggest problem in this movie is trash and the issue of trash, and we see kind of overflowing trash cans, and just that is the main issue facing Earth. Oh, and also something about 2049 they put in is that windows are circular, which I was just like, why in every futuristic thing are the windows circular? Like, I just think it's so funny that's like we're suddenly gonna change our window shape. What says future about this room? And it's like, just make the window circular. That's all we need. Something disappointing about 2049 is that basic white guys are still idolizing Elon Musk, basically, because our protagonist Walt is obsessed with Leon Covey, which I'm just like, Leon, Elon. They didn't even try to switch it up. The billionaire in this scenario reminds me a lot of Elon Musk, and it seems like the natural evolution of him spearheading the journey to Mars and the colonization of Mars, which is what's happening in this movie. I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on, like, do y'all think humans are gonna be space traveling by the 2040s or 2050s? Like, I mean, I guess Jeff Bezos and Branson did it this past year, so I guess it's not that out of the question, but at the same time, it's like, I can barely find time to travel to like real places now. Or real places, like Earth places. Now I have to be jealous of my friend Instagram storying herself on the moon. It's just adding a bunch of FOMO I don't need. I'm just joking. I don't know if I would be someone to go to space. I have a lot of sensory overload issues in general, so I don't know if I could handle it. I don't really know where we're at in humanity with space stuff. When I was in high school, I went to MIT. Yeah, I was smart once. And they said that it would take like 5 years to get to Mars or something like that. Maybe it was 3 years. I don't know. They said going to Mars would be really, really hard. Your body gets all fucked up being up there so long. Like, Mars is actually really, really far. Like the moon, sure, whatever. But Mars is a hard place to get to. And then on top of it, to make it livable, and the colonizing of it, that I don't think is in the realm of possibility for this century. I don't know. I swear, I think this movie was inspired by Titanic, but like they wanted to make it lighthearted version, like strip down Titanic, like just keep the romance part of Titanic, basically, which honestly, I'd be down to watch that. I don't need all the disaster. It's depressing. There's this one part in Moonshot where Walt and Sophie finally go on this spacewalk, which is where you can go outside into space and look at what there is to look at in space. It's a very beautifully done whole scene. That spacewalk scene, I feel like, was the open arms at the front of the ship moment where she's, you know, I'm flying, that scene. I feel like that was the equivalent in this. It was the moment of like wonderment of at this thing they were at. You know, you get what I'm saying. Honestly, I appreciate the bravery of the filmmakers to want to film with a cat, because there was this cat that snuck its way onto Mars, and then it was actually on the return flight at the very end when they were going back to Earth. A lot of the time you don't see cats in movies and TV because cats are notoriously difficult to work with. I'm not gonna deny that part, but it was cute, and the cat was so cute, and it made me want a cat, because lately I've been feeling, what's the term? It's like baby fever. I've been feeling cat fever of like I want a kitty. All in all, in this movie, the writing was really well done. Fuck all these critics that say otherwise, that it was too predictable, because it was well written and the dialogue was cute and fresh. I mean, Michelle Buteau is so good at comedy, and all the actors in this were really good, and the writing was good. And what got me thinking about the writing early on was all of the obstacles that they put in front of Walt to achieve his goal of being on Mars. They were like never ending. That's good writing when your protagonist is going through hell. And it's something I have an issue with nowadays, especially with things that are more like sequels, reboots, and things that aren't original. Writers are oftentimes scared to put their protagonist through hell because that character is beloved by fans, or it's a character you don't want bad things to happen to. But that is story, and that are movies. Any good story really tries to beat down and break down your protagonist. Like, you have to pretend like you hate this character so much. Like Walt at the very beginning, he has applied 37 times to this space program and gets rejected every time. He gets rejected again. We see that. He meets a girl, but she moves to Mars the next day. He meets another girl with money, and she wants nothing to do with him. He wants to get close to see a space launch, and they keep not letting him. He tries to sneak onto the plane, and he has a very difficult experience in the escape pod. Once he's in the escape pod, he needs an ID. It never ends. It's a million layers of obstacles just for Walt to get to Mars, this big grand goal that he has. I appreciated that, and I appreciated the good writing. Also, in general, the obstacle of Walt and Sophie being in two different relationships at the beginning of this, like, that's a big obstacle for our main couple to go through. I was watching this with my boyfriend, and we were like 30 minutes into the movie, or like well into the movie, and he stopped it. We paused it, and he was like, my prediction is that Walt and Sophie are gonna get together. And I was just like, girl, yeah, those are our protagonists. Like, that, this is a rom-com. Of course they're gonna get together. But he thought it was this big revolutionary prediction. Even the obstacles they put in our main relationship, I think, were significant enough for us to be like, well, are they gonna get together? Like, when are they gonna realize? So as usual, I've been watching a lot of the PR press junket interviews with Lana and Cole, just because that's become a hobby of mine. Every time I do one of these reviews, I'm like, I'm just gonna watch the press junket where they have to suffer and dance monkey dance for every news outlet ever. Because of these interviews, there have been a lot of quotes from Cole Sprouse about Riverdale, which just got renewed for season 7, and he seems very upset about it. That's a whole side tangent. I should do a Riverdale video or something, because my god, that show is ridiculous. There was this one part where Cole said, because Lana was trying to be funny and be like, I'm gonna come into Riverdale and do something, blow up this place, and Cole was like, we did that already. Cole said something like, if we were to mash a keyboard together for an hour and look at that script, I would say we've probably done it on Riverdale. And I was just like, the shade. So Cole Sprouse is ready for Riverdale to end. That's something that has come out of these interviews. And that they get the script on the day of. Riverdale's a whole other mess. For Moonshot, they got asked a lot of the same questions. Like, Lana and Cole were asked what drew them to the role, and they just said they both were looking for something lighthearted and fun. Cole was actually looking for something lighthearted and more goofy for him. They actually mentioned at some point that this is his most goofy role since Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. They had that little mini reunion where Lana was interviewing with Brenda Song, and Cole Sprouse crashed the interview saying like, oh my god, Brenda, I love you. Even though Brenda was like, you don't answer my text though. So she called him out, rightfully so, in the classiest Brenda Song way, of course. Cole was talking about how he hadn't had any goofy roles in a while, and he likes that kind of comedy acting. And honestly, yeah, a lot of the time Walt reminded me of the characters of Zack and Cody from way back in the day when I was a kid. Also, Cole is back to blonde in Moonshot, which I'm just like, oh, just keep him blonde. Like, why does everyone want to give him black hair? Like, it just doesn't suit him, I feel like. Anyway, so Cole was drawn to it because of the lighthearted nature of it, while Lana, on the other hand, was attracted to the script because of the space setting. She wanted to go out of her comfort zone because she's a rom-com lighthearted girl so far. She wanted something that was like just different, like different setting like that. The thing I hate about these press junket interviews is that they're like all 3 to 5 minutes long, and I'm just like, I want to hear like a whole podcast length deep dive into the movie. The closest I got to that was when they were discussing the themes. Like, they got asked, what are the themes of the movie? And I really liked their answers because they were true. It was mostly Cole, but because he answered first. He said, the whole message of the movie is to live in the present. Being so focused on a goal in the future, once you're there, it might not feel as extraordinary as you thought. It's all about enjoying the journey to get to that goal. And I think that's a very great and timeless lesson, something I'm trying to incorporate more and more of in my life, but it can be very hard to not get caught up in where you're trying to go and just enjoy where you are now. Walt and Sophie had a beautiful journey to Mars and seemed to really enjoy themselves, but once they were on Mars, they were miserable. The movie illustrates that concept really well. Lana also added to that about the theme of forging your own path, because for her character, it was less about the being in the present thing and more about putting your needs first and rather than behind someone else's, like her boyfriend. So I think really great messages overall. Cole also brought it back to like the macro of like the movie's message kind of also translates to colonization of Mars and how we should enjoy and conserve what we have now, which is Earth, rather than spending all this time and energy and resources to make Mars work for us. So the theme works for the romance part of it, but it also works for like the overall space concept of it, of like enjoy Earth now and preserve it and take care of it rather than focus on colonizing other places. Very interesting. A great movie. Just a very enjoyable time. Like, you can get deep and whatever about it, but honestly, it was just fun. Perfect length, not too long. Great visual effects, design of it, great actors, just everything. I had no complaints really about this movie. I would love to hear what you thought about Moonshot in the comments below. Who is your favorite character? Did you relate to any characters? Do you like the message? Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed. I put out new videos twice a week about TV, pop culture, internet trends, and other miscellaneous things. And you can follow me at Miscellaneous on Instagram or Twitter to find out about new videos, or just turn on the bell notification here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!